How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of On the Line. Today we're going to talk about how COVID is affecting our jails and prisons. Guys, we're on the second time around, so I think now we have more knowledge at our fingertips, more consistent practices. And today I thought we could bring on two great guests, author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon, Connie Alleyne. Connie, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host for The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. So exciting time. Glad that we're revisiting COVID-19 because certainly, a lot has happened. A lot of lives have been lost. And now is definitely not the time for us to ease up on our precautions.
Right. And obviously Connie also adds not just working in jail, but she has the medical side, which is great. And then we also have a newcomer to this channel who's going to be on the show a little bit more often. This is the first time he's made an appearance on the line, but he has been on a few episodes of Tier Talk. He's a jail admin out of Indiana, and his name is Andrew, or we can call him Andy Abney-Brotz. Andy, thanks for obviously tagging along with us on this one. Do you feel this is definitely a topic that we need to discuss?
Yeah, most definitely. Now it's the second wave's come through the nation. I think it's very important to really dive in and understand what this disease is doing to our jails.
Right now, guys, the first time around, obviously we weren't consistent, again, because it happened. This is unknown. And we basically, how to develop practices, things that work. And we learned that by finding out things that don't work. So there was a little bit of a scramble at the very beginning, but now we're about 9-10 months in. We know that COVID hits the prisons and jails hard. At one point I felt at the beginning when this was happening, we were forgotten, but I would like to think that is of no more. I mean, we definitely have our brave men and women, our heroes, working every day, motivated to make sure that not only do they protect the population, but they also protect the public. And I think like right now, I think people are starting to really start to think that, we got to get the resources out to these prisons and jails, making sure that we're making their job as safe as possible. But again, at the very beginning, there was a scramble. And I think in that scramble, a lot of people may have lost a little confidence or a little trust in what we were doing. But guys, figure this out. This was a threat that we didn't have the answers to. We were in the process of developing solutions. And I think at this point, we are leading the way with a lot of the practices, and we're doing our best to minimize the spread of this just unknown enemy. But Connie, if you had to look at where we were, 9 months ago, 10 months ago, about 8-9 months ago to where we're at now in the prisons and jails, what would you say are some of the big differences?
So now I think we're a bit more stable with PPE. I think just understanding the need for everyone to wear a mask as opposed to just the officers or just the inmates. I think a lot of the debates that we were having when this all first started are no longer happening, or hopefully they're not still happening, because we just need to make sure people are safe behind the wall. I think the other thing we want to make sure that we're doing is that the other thing that I think we are more certain about is how do we disinfect? I think in the beginning, it was how long does it live in the air? How long does it live in, on a surface? And I think we're a lot more clear on those things that we once debated. And as we, I think, continue to learn more about COVID-19 and its efficacy as far as transmission, we evolve. I think as an institution, we are following the CDC guidelines, the Department of Public Health, all are kind of weighing in, making sure that, what was once a situation that we had no control over, that we have a bit more control over how it's handled behind the wall, as well as how we protect our staff and the inmates.
Yeah, one of the things, guys, is the first thing that we all were looking for from the get-go, from staff to inmates, especially from the higher level, was consistent practices, which we knew had to be developed. It's not, hey, this is happening, let's be consistent. It's not. There was a scramble to develop what that consistency is. Then consistency brought confidence. We talked about that. Confidence brought trust. And that's key. I think right now we should be operating on a trust factor. I think we're at a point right now where our practices are consistent. Staff is becoming confident in what they need to get done. And I think the inmates are able to see some level of that confidence, especially when it comes to the practices that we're trying to put in play to maintain a safe and secure facility, but not just safety from COVID, but don't forget, guys, safety, for the inmate population as well as staff. There's a lot of things that we have to try to balance out. But I know, Andrew, at the very beginning, when you found out that this threat was coming, now I think in the East Coast, Jersey, New York, we got hit with it when it originated. We're one of we're the motherland, if you will. I think that when you start moving a little west, maybe out to Indiana or something like that, maybe there was like, okay, let's see what's happening at these jails in New York, these prisons in New York and in Jersey, and let's try to see, if we could borrow some of their good practices and some of their knowledge and help prevent it here. But was there an effort to really see what's happening out there? And did that give you enough time to put some preventive measures where you're at?
When we heard this was coming through, and it was like a wave, we started to watch it come west from the East Coast. We started to pay attention to webinars that were out there for correctional staff and for medical staff in the jails, and really start to understand what COVID-19 inside of the walls meant. And, it was more of a scramble to get that information out to the inmate population once it started to hit the area. And, trying to find PPE. There was a shortage on a lot of things, and just trying to coordinate all of that with the public, other officials, the health department, et cetera. And, just trying to keep everybody safe as well as doing our first priority jobs.
Well, I think the key first, guys, for any facility right now is education. Make sure you get the knowledge out there. Make sure that, staff and inmates alike aren't, listening to the media 100% of the time and playing into the hype. Make sure that you give them real good stats that are honest and truthful. And yes, sometimes whatever that information that you find has to make its way through staff back to the population, because the population still has access to the news. Their family has access to the news. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that when we're reacting, because we're sort of in a preventive mode, but there's also, we're going around to round two. So again, there's that scramble. So there's a mixture of preventive and reactive measures. I just want to make sure that we're preventing or reacting on what's reality and what's, and we're not wasting our resources on what's not reality. Now, just to give you a little example of how much we've improved, even my perspective has evolved. I remember at one point when this is first started, there was a push for custody to wear masks. And a lot of people didn't want that because they didn't want to scare the population. Now, right off the bat, I was always for custody wearing masks because I said, well, or I'm sorry, correctional staff wearing masks, because the threat would come from the outside in. But then once it's in there, you don't want it to spread. So then the perspective changed from, the population's got to get the mask too. Again, because you don't want them to spread it once they've gotten it. So at first I wasn't for that because the custody side of me was like safety and security. Don't want to be giving these inmates these masks. But within a few weeks of, how fast this, this thing spreads, that view lasted only, but again, briefly, few weeks before it's like, what, guys, officers are getting sick. Officers are dying. At this point, we have custody that can do their job. Maybe these inmates have to wear these masks. And now it's gotten to the point where they have to wear that mask. Connie, do you remember when that was a discussion where it was custody or correctional staff need to wear the mask, but inmates, no, because the threat's coming from the outside in. But then eventually it was like, you know what, man, because it's so quick, inmates need to wear that mask, and then custody can kind of deal or balance the security concern, correct?
Absolutely. I remember that long-standing debate because, we thought that it was, with staff who were going in and out, that's what a real threat was. But the reality is that if in fact an inmate was actually somehow exposed, they also were now an internal threat. I think the other challenge we were presented with was testing, right? So we weren't testing everyone, and there was not those systems in place that we could capture someone who might have already come in through intake, who might already be housed, who might be already impacting an entire housing unit. So just didn't make sense that we would be protecting just the staff and then have the vulnerability of the inmate population out in the units already or what have you. So we really, I think, came to terms with the fact that everyone needs to be protected, because you just never know what happened and when.
Yeah, because our perspective evolved, because it is protection, but at the very beginning, it was like we didn't want to have staff bringing it in. So the effort for the mask was really to protect the population. But then again, once it's already caught, what are we doing now to protect staff who doesn't have it going in, who has a chance to get it? Because again, the mask at first was, to really put on the people that were symptomatic, and again, getting a hold of the mask. I felt that at the very beginning, prisons had to fight to get a hold of those masks, those PPE gear, because we were last resort. Like, I think that, resources were going elsewhere, and I saw it in Rikers. Rikers had to fight to get masks, had to fight to get PPE gear. And I would like to think now, because people have seen how real the threat is in our prisons and jails, the PPE gear, it's more accessible than it was before to us. I'll just say that, because right now PPE gear is tough. It's very limited. But having said that, the protective gear, the sanitizer, the bleach, all that stuff is now, once available, it is accessible more than it was before. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Did you have any problem ever getting any of that protective gear, or maybe the bleach that was needed, or sanitizers, Andy?
Yeah, we did. The supplier we were using was back ordered. Hospitals, nursing homes, those were first priority places, and I understood that. However, we'll still have a confined population of people that we were trying to protect, and public was not on our side. For the fact of they were making things up. Everyone in the jail had COVID, according to the public and the media. So trying to combat that as well. But yeah, definitely cleaning supplies, wipes, gloves, bleach, all that stuff was in short supply. We were just trying to gather what we could to make it by.
I think part of that scare that we had did come from the media, which made it hard for us to get what we needed, because the public could have, I'm not going to say they were overreacting, but they definitely didn't consider the prisons and jails and how bad we're going to need them. I mean, automatically it was like, we got to release the inmates. We got to release the inmates. Well, guess what, guys? Not all inmates are eligible for release. So what we need to do is we need to put effort, not just in releasing of the inmates, but also in helping deal with the inmates that have to stay, because their life is just as important as the life of an inmate that could be released. And then obviously the staff who's going to be there to make sure their needs are met, which would include, custody, maintenance, food service, the program provides. Because here's the funny thing, guys, what you guys don't realize too is that, again, this is just an audience out there, is that, and when I say that, I mean the public, guys, the public, don't I forget, but what the public may not realize is that even though it looked like you wanted to limit traffic going into a facility, so yes, visits gone, volunteers gone, stuff like that, we also have to increase some of the civilian responsibilities, because they're getting ready to prepare people for release. So, it's very hard to cut them, because we need those numbers. Because again, we have inmates that are getting released by the masses, and that's a process behind that. There's calculations, and where are they going? Who are we releasing them to? So there's a big process behind that required our staff to come into work every day despite the threat. And again, bravo for the staff that continues to do that, for the civilians who are doing that every day, for custody who's doing that every day. Bravo. It's something that I feel people just weren't taking into account, the threat that we face every day. Now, one of the other things that we're doing right now is obviously from as soon as you enter the facility, the temperature checks. Anything over 100.4, that person gets sent home until they're able to. Well, it changed now, so let's actually talk about this real quick. Let's talk about the quarantine and the isolations, because a lot has changed since the first time around. So, want me to start this off first, Connie? Then you go, and then Andy, because I'll just kind of introduce some of the practices that most facilities are doing now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that works. Or even Andy can go, since that this is currently, what he's working with.
All right. So So what we have first here is this. Obviously, there's two things we're concerned about when it comes to COVID, besides the spread, is for the people that have it, the positive, and for those who have been exposed. Now, because we've evolved and we should be maintaining social distancing, as best we could. That's the hard part, but there's some level of maintaining that. And also wearing the face mask, there should really be no substantial contact. There shouldn't be, because again, we would be concerned with cellmates. That's one thing, but other than that, movements are limited, groups are limited or non-existent. So any chance where there could be a group gathering, they're very limited. So that should help prevent some of the spread. But with that said, when this first started, if someone tested positive, it would literally be that person tested positive, and then you would have whoever they had direct contact with would also have to go on quarantine. And the problem was, and I'll go with Andy on this first, is that we were losing a lot of staff right from the get-go, because one positive could affect many people. So in universal precaution was, you know what? The one positive, they got to isolate, and so do the people that had direct contact. Now, did your facility have that at the very beginning?
Yes, we pretty much shut down everything as far as programming, classes, ministers, they weren't allowed to come into the jail. So we were pretty, public side of visitation. We were very tentative of doing that. And because, we just didn't know. We kind of assumed that everybody that came into the jail, including staff, were positive. And we kind of took that approach in maintaining safe distances, making sure everyone had their temperature taken, telling supervisors, look, if you feel or your staff members feel ill, send them home, so we don't run the chance of infecting the entire population. So it was definitely a huge concern. I saw that throughout the entire state, not just in my area.
Right. And then what happened was, again, because now we have masks, we're maintaining social distances, we have the proper PPE gear. It's for some facilities now, it's if you do have someone that's isolated, the test is positive, we do some level of contact tracing. But contact tracing, when you're looking at substantial contact at work, you're looking at someone who has been within 6 feet without a face mask on for longer than 15 minutes. And that shouldn't be happening as much as it was before, because now we should be consistent with the practices of wearing face masks and maintaining social distances. So would you see that as one of the main differences right now, Connie?
So I think that's one of the main differences, but I think that's one of the main challenges, right? Like, I think, to work in your mask for 8 hours, 16 hours, like it's a long time to have a mask on. I find that, people do need a breather, right? I've talked to many staff that are trying to find a safe place to get fresh air. I think the challenge that we might be faced in many facilities is there aren't open windows, right? I mean, maybe if you work in an office setting, space area, admin area or such, you may be able to get the fresh air, or even just walking out of the facility onto the compound, you can get the fresh air. But, I think that just the being in the facility all day long, and it is your everyday routine. I have talked to people about, them sort of letting their guard down a little bit and removing mask and being, still trying to maintain the social distance. But, you think of someone who's on the floor working all day long, right? Like I think about the nursing team. They don't always get to go outside to go get fresh air. Right. And so there are these instances where we have slight exposures or minimal exposures because people don't have the free time to be able to go out and get fresh air. So, I think, yes, we've seen the evolution of how we respond. We've seen the evolution of how we practice internal to the facility. But I think the human behavior, as much as we want to stay safe and keep others from anyway being infected, like sometimes you just need a breather, and the workload doesn't always allow you to do that safely. So I think that is the newer challenge that we're faced with.
I agree. You know, what's funny is when this first started, the human behavior was still to break that social distance norm because we're social creatures. I like to think that most of us do respect it to some point, but I do think that I've learned that we tend to group up. So like if, I guess you compare it to like a household, like this is my house. So usually we trust the people within that house. So this is the administrative side and we're all good. And oh, there's an outsider coming in, everybody put on your mask. But technically, you know, we're all have to be maintaining that. But you're right, we look for those breathers, you know, and sometimes, you know, let's say just for an example, or let's say Andy, whatever for an example is that, you know, you're in your office, that's your home. You know, you may wind up taking that mask off in your office because that's your home technically. You know, I mean, that's your home at the job, which you spend a good portion of your day at. And then when someone comes in from the outside, I would like to think that they should be more, hey, got to get that mask on, because then it'll remind us to put on the mask. There are times where you'll have these dialogues and you know, you forget, like, oh my God, I haven't been wearing my mask for like 10 minutes. What am I thinking? I mean, no different than people, and guys, you know, this is true. Have you ever walked to a Target and said, oh my God, I forgot my mask, I had to go back to your car? I mean, you know, sometimes we get so used to the routine of the job. And this is still, as much as we want to say it's routine, it's not, because we've been doing this job for 18 years and we never had to put masks on before. So now this is part of a new routine. The newer people, they adjust a lot quicker than the older people who have to still try to break away from that norm of walking around the building freely without that mask on, especially when, you know, let's say they, like Connie says, they take it off for a breather and then they, you know, something happens and they forget to put it back on. You know, it could happen because we're human. But again, that's where management comes in. They look at the cameras and they remind staff as much as they can the importance of wearing the mask and maintaining social distance. Andy, do you find yourself doing that a lot, reminding people?
Absolutely. I almost feel like the mask police when I'm at work, but you know, just constantly reminding people walking down the hallway, whether they're walking past my office or with an inmate or back in population, you know, make sure you cover up, because it's not the inmates I'm worried about that would be infected. It's the staff bringing it into the population. So we definitely need to be proactive, have the mask on. Yes, it's a pain, but we want to stop the spread, not continue it. So that's definitely an important part.
I mean, I remember reading some things where even in dorms, they have inmates sleeping feet to head, so they're not directly breathing on each other. And again, we're working in a prison, so there are a lot of confined spaces. One of the other things too, guys, is sometimes the public, not just pushing for the release, but they want to push for things to open back up again. And that was a bit of a conflict. So I think that's one thing now that has really changed. Like, you know, once you do the practice before, you're not afraid to do it again if needed. I mean, one of the biggest concerns across the country, it's crazy, guys, but it's true, is the inmate contact with their families. You know, we can't have visits. And well, what about not, we just can't have visits because we can't risk the potential for the outside to connect with the inmates. But the funny was people like, well, you can still have non-contact visits. Yeah, but they still have to go through staff. So again, we're not thinking about staff at all. Like, yeah, of course we can have contact visit if the person was able to walk from the outside of the prison or the jail directly to the inmate, but that doesn't happen. They're going to have a lot of interactions with staff that put the staff at risk, which again put the inmates at risk. So having said that, once you're able to cancel visits the first time and get that explanation out there, it's a lot easier to do it the second time, which I believe, because we're on the rise again, you're going to start to see that more and more. Same thing with the volunteers, the programs. You know, it's like, you know what, any chance to limit the outside, you have to do it. And sometimes that's going to supersede, you know, maybe a religious service that we have to do, or that contact that person's having with their family. I mean, Connie, you remember the first time, like, this was a big to-do. I mean, are we going to cancel visits, you know, with the inmates and their families, because it's a big part of rehabilitation? But people have to realize, yeah, rehabilitation is very important. Don't get me wrong, it is. But that's if the facility is safe and secure to do so. And right now, would you consider it a safe and secure facility to be bringing visits in?
No, not right now. I just feel like, so the realities of a facility hasn't changed, right? Like, so facilities are poised for disease transmission, right? Because they are close quarters, because, the ventilations aren't like most modern, right? Many of the facility, the buildings themselves, the infrastructures are older buildings. And so you don't have clean airflow. You don't have all the technology that could possibly keep the facility, I guess, as clean air filtered as possible. I just don't think that it is really conducive to managing this transmission, as well as outsiders bringing in whatever it is they may bring into the facility.
And hey, Andy, when they started doing this, I don't know how your facility operates, whether they canceled visits or volunteers, but was that something that was a decision that was made lightly, or, was it a hard decision to make?
Wasn't a hard decision to make. And, priority was keeping it out of the facility for sure due to the confined population. But, we were able to go remote visitation, cancel on-site visits and just go remote. We really utilized Zoom, leaned on those guys a lot to do court hearings, attorney visits and things. So, definitely made safety and security a little better. I'm not saying it made the industry better, but, it was just basically, let's just shut everything down, just keep it out of here the best we can.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I like the compromise too, or the plans in play. Like, we know we, have to do this, this, and this, but how do we try our best to make it up? So you're right. I like that. Like, okay, we can't do the visits, but maybe we can increase phone calls. Maybe there's a way we could balance it out to keep the inmates at bay during this chaotic time, so it's easier for staff. Mind you, that's why it's being done. You're right. At any time, if we have to, we can lock it down and go back to old school methods, but it just adds too much stress on staff. It becomes extremely chaotic where, if we could do what we can to balance, okay, we took away this, but we'll give this. Because I think also a lot of people from the outside will be quick to say, well, why don't you just cut it? It's not that easy, because sometimes those wants that the inmates have, that motivates good behavior, and how staff control that is by taking that behavior away. So when you start, actually doublefold, when you start making wants needs, or when you start, minimizing the importance of how staff can regulate things through good behavior, you don't realize how we maintain levels of control. We control things by, I guess it's like a want versus need. Basically, hey, if you want this, staff has a level of control over that, which it will be utilized if you don't do the right thing. So you earn those privileges back. It's the need. The need makes it tough, because when you start making their wants needs, staff starts to lose out on that level of control that they need to motivate good behavior. So there should be certain things that remain wants or remain privileges. So staff has an effort to, okay, you messed up. Now, if you want this back, you got to earn it. So again, this is just a quick discussion. I know it took a little longer than usual, but again, I feel that we are in a different place now than we were when it first happened. I believe there should be more consistent plans in place. There should be more confidence in what we're doing behind the wall. There should be more knowledge of the threat that this has behind the wall, and not just from staff and the inmates, but also from the people from the outside looking in, because maybe they didn't realize the threat, but you can't deny it now. So again, the consistency, the confidence, the trust, and then we just have to batter our way through it. And I will tell you one more thing before we come to a close too, is that when it was unknown, staff was nervous coming in. I think now, when we put these protective measures in place, it motivates them. They're still nervous. They're still afraid, who wouldn't be, but they step up a lot more because they're trusting that the system, they're believing that because now we've become more consistent, staff is becoming more confident, and they're starting to trust us, which alleviates some of the unknown. But Connie, anything you'd like to say in closing? Like, basically, where were we yesterday to where we are now?
I would just like to say that, we can't let our guards down. We understand what's going on with COVID out in the community, and they're very, we're consistent in protecting ourselves and protecting our families. And the only thing I would remind people is that as you go in and out of facilities, protecting yourself and protecting your colleagues, that's your work family, protecting the inmates should still remain a priority. So not easing off on what is required to remain safe, just remember that even though you're in a facility, there's still ways that you could contract it, and you want to make sure that you don't want to bring home any unnecessary gifts to your family.
I like how you said unnecessary gifts. Made it sound like it was herpes. Sorry, I'm just saying, we're all adults, right? We're all adults. That's an unnecessary gift too. Hey, Andy, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I think where we were, March or April of this year, we're definitely way, in the right direction. It's that, it's still a tense topic. We kind of understand what COVID-19 is. We're combating it. However, we still wanted to stay out of our facilities. So, I'm not going to say I'm more comfortable with it. That's kind of what it is, not as much as earlier this year. So stay safe, wear gloves, wear your masks, be an advocate for your facility. And thank you.
Yeah, guys, as always, guys, just another dialogue. We're touching on it again. So it's good to be, on point. There should be no excuse why we don't have those consistent practices in play. So again, thank you guys for taking part in this discussion. As always, guys, the show is on the line. Don't forget to subscribe to Guardian RFID. A lot of good content is on this channel, and they're a true supporter of what we do in this profession. Stay safe.